This was a one-in-a-billion moment. No one could have ever imagined it. A horse named Robbin jumped from the 7th floor of a building. It was so shocking that it became breaking news, leaving everyone in the city asking the same question. Why? People in the crowd below couldn't believe their eyes. They had gathered, going about their normal day, and suddenly they saw a horse leap through the air. Time seemed to freeze as they stared up in disbelief. The horse, Robbin, fell quickly, the sound of hooves echoing through the air. Everyone gasped, hearts pounding. Was Robbin alive? Or had it been a terrible, tragic end? Why was Robbin even up there on the 7th floor? What was the horse doing so high up, away from the fields and freedom it should have had? The questions flooded everyone's mind. Had Robbin jumped to escape? Was it trying to break free from something? Or was there something much darker going on that no one understood? Chris, the horse's owner, was watching in shock, his face pale. What had led to this moment? What had pushed Robbin to do something so drastic? No one knew the answers. People wondered, what happened to Robbin after the jump? Was it a sad ending? Or was there more to this story? This was an event that no one would forget, and the mystery of why Robbin jumped would stay with everyone unanswered. It was a story that would be talked about for a long time. Just imagine standing there, watching this horrifying scene unfold. What was going on inside the horse's mind in those final moments? Was it driven by fear, or perhaps something else? The decision to leap from such a height wasn't a small one. Could it have been a cry for help? Or was this animal finally making a stand for its own freedom? The answers will leave you speechless. Chris, the owner of the horse, was a face many, recognized in the neighborhood. At first glance, he seemed like just another friendly man, always greeting people with a warm smile. He was the type of person who would stop and chat with anyone, sharing laughs and making small talk. But if you looked a little closer, something about him felt off, like there was more to his story than he let on. Over time, the whispers started. People began to notice things that didn't add up. It wasn't just his friendly attitude. There were rumors that painted a very different picture of Chris. He wasn't just known for his smile. He had a reputation that followed him, and it wasn't a good one. There were stories about how he treated his animals, especially his horses. Some said they always seemed anxious around him, like they were constantly on edge, never fully relaxed. It was as though they could sense something wasn't right. Chris's horses weren't the only ones who seemed affected by his presence. People who had worked with him or been around him for long periods noticed that his charm didn't go as deep as it seemed. His warm smile felt forced, like a mask he wore to hide something darker. Some even suggested that the horses knew something the rest of the world didn't, that maybe years of mistreatment had pushed one of them too far. Could one of them finally snap? The questions started to pile up. What was really going on behind those friendly eyes? Was Chris really the man he appeared to be? Or was his smile just a way to cover up something much worse? People began to wonder what he was hiding, because there had to be something. His behavior, his horses, and the strange way they reacted to him all pointed to one unsettling conclusion. Chris's story wasn't what he wanted everyone to believe. Something about him didn't quite sit right, and the more people asked, the more they realized that the truth could be far more sinister than they had imagined. As the mystery deepened, it became clear. There was more to Chris than just a neighbor with a horse. And the secrets he kept were darker than anyone could have guessed. The horse, a creature made for wide-open fields and endless horizons, suddenly found itself locked away in a small, dark room. The room felt like a cage, trapping it far from the freedom it was born to enjoy. Each day dragged on, blending into night, as it sat there in isolation, with no way to break free. The air inside was thick and heavy, carrying the stale scent of being confined for too long. Mr. Chris had captured Robbin and kept him on a high floor of a building, far above the ground, where escape seemed impossible. The room was small, dark and cramped, designed to keep the horse confined and helpless. The fear from constant torture forced Robbin to obey Chris, despite the animal's natural instinct to be free. The room was so high up and the walls so close that it felt like there was no way out. Robbin's life had become a never-ending cycle of fear and submission. Outside, the city buzzed with life. Cars honked, people shouted, and the hum of traffic never stopped. But to the horse, all of that noise was just a reminder of what it had lost, a life full of open spaces, green pastures, and the wind in its mane. For an animal that was meant to run free, this was nothing short of a nightmare. Every sound, from the honking horns to the rumble of engines, seemed to mock it. It was as if the world outside was taunting the horse, reminding it of the freedom it no longer had. The longer it stayed in that small room, the more the tension built inside of it. The walls seemed to close in, growing tighter and tighter around its body and soul. How much could it take? How long could it endure being stuck in a place it didn't belong? The horse's spirit was being tested, slowly wearing down with every passing moment. What happens when the desire to run, to be free, crashes headfirst into the harsh reality of being trapped? The room was a prison, and the horse's will to escape burned brighter with each passing day. It wanted to break free, to feel the open sky above it, to run without limits. But instead, it was stuck, its mind and body aching for the life it once knew. The question lingered in the air. How much more could it handle before it did something to escape its fate? The horse, once a symbol of grace and calm, was now consumed by fear. Its steady heartbeats had turned into a rapid rhythm of panic. The endless noise, the roar of engines, the sharp cries of the city pounded against its sensitive ears, amplifying its distress. Each day, the confined space around it felt smaller, pressing in like an unrelenting cage. Every step it took was hesitant, its movements shaky with anxiety. The once vibrant spirit was dimming, replaced by the overwhelming weight of hopelessness. But then, on one of those endless days, the horse noticed something it had overlooked before. A window. The light streaming through that small opening seemed different, inviting, almost like a promise. Was this the way out? Could it finally escape the prison that had stolen its freedom? The horse's fear mixed with a spark of determination. This window wasn't just glass, it was hope. Chris approached the horse, his voice sharp and commanding. He barked orders, expecting the same obedience he'd always demanded. But this time the horse didn't flinch. It stood firm, its eyes blazing with a mix of anger and desperation. Something inside the horse had snapped. The frustration of confinement. The fear and the endless noise had built up until it could no longer hold back. Chris's once powerful presence meant nothing now. The bond they once shared, if it had ever truly existed, was gone. The horse stomped the ground, its body tense with rebellion. Chris, caught off guard, tried to regain control, but the animal wasn't listening anymore. It was no longer just a horse. It was a force of defiance, refusing to bow to the man who had taken its freedom. This moment marked the end of their fragile relationship. The question was no longer if the horse would escape, but when, and what would happen when it did. The silence in the room shattered in an instant. With a sudden burst of energy, the horse charged forward, its pent-up fear and frustration exploding into chaos. The fragile walls of its confinement gave way as it thrashed and pushed with unrelenting force. Furniture toppled like dominoes. A table crashed to the floor, scattering shards of wood and glass everywhere. The sounds of destruction echoed through the space. A chaotic symphony of fear turned into raw power. Each step the horse took left a trail of broken objects, as if it were erasing every trace of its imprisonment. Chris stood frozen, his voice drowned out by the noise. The horse wasn't just escaping, it was unleashing its fury. This wasn't mere panic. It felt deliberate, as though the horse wanted to ensure there would be nothing left behind to remind it of this place. Why was it destroying everything in its path? Was this the culmination of its fear, or a calculated rebellion against the life it had endured? Whatever the reason, the horse's actions made one thing clear. It wouldn't let anything stop it from finding freedom. The room trembled as the horse's frantic movements shook the walls. Its hooves pounded against the floor with a heavy rhythmic sound, each stride closer to an unimaginable decision. The sound echoed through the space like the beat of a drum, steady and urgent. The horse was moving quickly now, heading straight for the window. Its eyes, wide with fear, scanned the space as it approached the glass. Outside, the crowd was watching in shock, frozen in disbelief. Whispers turned into gasps as the horse's every movement made it clear. Something was about to happen. The air was thick with tension, and it felt like time was moving slower. The horse stood still for a moment, its body shaking, but its eyes full of determination. It breathed fast, each breath heavy with fear and frustration. It looked down at the crowd below, their eyes wide, their hearts racing. What was the horse thinking? Was this its last chance to escape, to break free from the life it had been forced to live? Or was it more than that? A statement, a way to say it had enough? Then, without any warning, the horse did something no one saw coming. It jumped. The glass shattered as the horse crashed through the window. The sound of breaking glass echoed in the air, sparkling in the sunlight like tiny raindrops. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The horse was soaring through the air, no longer trapped by the walls that had held it. The crowd below screamed in shock, their voices a mix of panic and amazement. In that single moment, the horse wasn't just an animal, it became something more. It was a symbol of freedom, of breaking free from the pain and captivity. It was a message that touched the hearts of everyone who saw it. What was going through the horse's mind as it flew through the air? Was it simply trying to escape, running from its past, desperate for freedom? Or was this jump something more powerful? An act of defiance, a bold statement that it was not just a victim, but a fighter, refusing to be controlled any longer? The truth was unclear, but one thing was certain. This was no ordinary leap. This was an act of courage, of rebellion, and it would be remembered forever. The horse had done more than escape. It had sent a message that no one could ignore. The crowd was left stunned, questioning the true reason behind the horse's daring leap. Was it a cry for help, or was it a defiant roar against the cruelty it had endured? Whatever it was, one thing stood out above all. This was the moment that everything changed. The horse had made its move, and the world would never look at it the same way again. When Robbin, the horse, made his daring jump, his leg broke upon, landing. The crowd gasped in shock as people rushed to help him. An ambulance quickly arrived to take him to the hospital. Inside the hospital, Robbin was treated, and doctors worked hard to heal his broken leg. For a few days, Robbin rested, still in pain, but slowly recovering. Chris soon arrived at the hospital, his face full of fear and anger. He rushed into Robbin's room and shouted, "Come back, Robbin, let's go!" He wanted to get Robbin out of there, but Robbin, still hurting, kicked the bed in defiance. The doctor, shaking his head, told Chris firmly, "Go away. He can't go anywhere. He needs time to heal." Chris was frustrated but didn't argue. He knew Robbin was hurt, but deep down, he had another reason for wanting him to leave. Chris didn't want anyone to find out the truth. If Robbin stayed in the hospital too long, someone might uncover the cruel way Chris had treated him. Chris was terrified of being exposed. He didn't want the headlines or anyone to discover what was really happening behind closed doors. Days passed, and slowly Robbin began to recover. His leg healed, and soon he was able to move again. But one day, just as Chris feared, Robbin ran. He broke free from the hospital, galloping away without hesitation. Robbin was no longer trapped. He was free to do what he truly wanted. Chris was now in a panic. Where was Robbin? What had happened to him? The fear gripped Chris, knowing that Robbin could now reveal everything. The question everyone was asking, what was Chris hiding? What dark secrets had Robbin almost exposed? The world would soon find out. Soon, the shocking truth came to light. The horse was not alone. In the shadows of Chris's property, other animals were discovered. As the truth began to unfold, the shocking reality came to light. Chris, the man everyone thought was just a simple animal lover, had been hiding a dark secret. It turned out that Chris had captured many animals, including Robbin, and kept them, locked away in dark, cramped spaces. His method of training them was cruel, using fear and punishment to force them to obey. The animals were terrified, and Robbin, having suffered the most, became determined to break free. In a way that no one could have imagined, Robbin led the police right to the place where the other animals were being kept. The horse's act of defiance was not just an escape. It was a brave attempt to free the others who were suffering in silence. As the police arrived, they discovered the hidden rooms where Chris had been keeping the animals. The officers worked quickly to free the terrified creatures, including Robbin's fellow prisoners. The truth about Chris's cruel behavior was now clear for everyone to see. Robbin had become a hero, not just for escaping, but for showing the world the suffering that had been hidden behind closed doors. Thanks to Robbin's bravery, the animals were freed, and Chris's twisted control was finally brought to an end. They were weak, terrified, and covered in scars, clear signs of neglect. Each animal told its own heartbreaking story, and together, they painted a picture of the terrible life Chris had forced them to live. They had been trapped in a world of fear and suffering, far away from the kindness and care they deserved. As the truth spread, it became clear that Chris had been hiding behind a mask of charm and friendliness for years. He had fooled the community, making people believe he was someone trustworthy. But beneath the surface, his actions were cruel and unkind. His home had been a prison for these animals, and for years no one knew the horrors they faced. The truth had been buried, hidden in plain sight. But now everything was different. The horse's escape had shattered the silence, and people were starting to ask questions. What else had Chris been hiding? Were there more animals trapped in his care? More secrets hidden away in the dark corners of his home? As the walls of his deceit began to crumble, the community realized there was no turning back. Chris could no longer hide from the truth. He had to face the consequences of his actions, and justice had finally begun. This wasn't just the end of Chris's lies, it was the beginning of a much-needed reckoning. The horse's bravery had set everything in motion. Now, it was time for Chris to face the full weight of his cruelty. And for the animals he had hurt, their suffering would no longer go unnoticed. Their voices, once silenced, had been heard. The fight for justice had begun. The horse, once a victim of neglect and fear, had transformed into something far more powerful. It was no longer just an animal trapped in a sad situation. It had become a symbol of courage and defiance. What seemed like a desperate escape was actually a bold stand against the cruelty it had suffered for so long. As the story of its daring leap spread, the world stood in awe. People couldn't help but recognize that this wasn't just an accident or a random act of fear. The horse had sent a message. That escape wasn't just for freedom. It was a call for change. It showed the world that even the most silent creatures have their limits. When pushed to the edge, they too can fight back. The horse's act wasn't just about survival. It was a powerful reminder that animals are not just objects to be used or ignored. They have feelings. They experience pain, and they long for the same freedom and respect that any living being deserves. The world began to see the horse for what it truly was, a hero. The Robbin horse wasn't just an animal. It had become a symbol for everyone who had ever been mistreated, overlooked, or silenced. Its bravery sparked change. People started talking about the hidden cruelty animals face in everyday life. They began to question how much suffering goes unnoticed, how many animals live in fear, and how they could help make a difference. This horse's escape was more than just an act of rebellion. It became a movement. It encouraged people everywhere to take a deeper look at how animals are treated and to reflect on their own actions. Communities started to realize that we all have a part to play in the fight for kindness and compassion toward animals. How often do we overlook the silent struggles of animals around us? What steps can we take to ensure their voices are heard and their lives are treated with the respect they deserve? The horse's brave escape was the turning point. It was a moment that changed everything. When the horse broke free, it revealed the truth about Chris and the terrible way he treated the animals. Neighbors and authorities could no longer ignore what had been happening. The animals' silent cries for help were finally heard. One by one, the animals were freed. They were no longer stuck in small, dark places. The air around them was no longer filled with fear and sadness. The horses ran through open fields, the dogs wagged their tails joyfully, and every creature could finally breathe freely. For the first time in a long while, the animals felt safe. They weren't scared anymore. They had been set free because of the horse's bold leap. That one brave act changed everything for them. It was as if the horse had not only saved itself, but had also given freedom to every animal trapped in Chris's care. But what about Chris? Now that everyone knew what he had been doing, would he be held accountable for the pain he caused? Would he face the consequences for the cruelty? Or would he get away with it? Only time would tell what would happen to him. The story of the Robbin horse didn't end with its escape. It became a beacon of change. News of the horse's brave defiance spread far and wide, capturing the hearts of people everywhere. This wasn't just a tale of survival, it was a wake-up call. The horse's rebellion showed the world what happens when animals are mistreated and pushed beyond their limits. Communities rallied together, demanding justice for the horse and other animals like it. Protests were organized, petitions were signed, and laws advocating for the humane treatment of animals gained renewed attention. The Horses Act had sparked a movement, uniting people to stand up for creatures that couldn't speak for themselves. The Robbin horse became a symbol of courage, resilience, and the need for compassion. Its story reminded everyone that animals deserve to live with dignity, free from fear and harm. How can you help ensure animals are treated with kindness and respect? Will you take a stand for those who can't defend themselves? The brave horse, who made that fateful jump from the 7th floor, didn't just escape, it ignited a revolution. Its courage left an everlasting mark, inspiring people everywhere to see animals in a different light. What was once viewed as simple animals in captivity became a symbol of hope and defiance. As its story spread, communities began to understand that animals deserve compassion, respect, and freedom. The horse's legacy wasn't just about its escape. It was about the hearts it changed and the voices it gave to those who had none. What other hidden stories of courage and defiance lie beneath the surface? Is the Robbin horse the last of its kind? Or will this be the spark that leads to many more animals standing up for their rights? The Robbin horse story isn't just about a single brave animal. It's a reminder that animals deserve respect, kindness, and freedom from cruelty. Will we act on this truth? Or will we let another chance slip away? The choice is ours.